Now joined by Shobha Dey and also the theatre director Amir Raza Hussain, and hopefully that line to Siddharth Varadarajan is up and functioning. Shobha Dey, let me put to you a question that in a sense we discussed in part one before you joined us. Does the prospect of Narendra Modi as Prime Minister worry you, excite you, or are you just curious to find out what it would amount to?
I just feel that, the party should wait till tomorrow afternoon. We've often been taken totally by surprise, whatever the exit polls may say or not say. So I really think we should hold those laddus for now. And we'll wait for the numbers to kick in. But am I excited is the question. Yes, I am excited because no matter how one regards Mr. Modi, the point is that there is going to be a new era for India. And if he is indeed the new Prime Minister, we are declaring to the world that we're going unambiguously to the right. And that's a message that will cheer, the cockles of many hearts will be feeling really great about it by tomorrow evening. So this election has sent out very strong messages, and those messages, if Mr. Modi is indeed going to be there, waving to the crowds tomorrow, and there'll be a sense of euphoria, and the laddus are going to be distributed, I am excited, yes, because it marks a change from 10 years of neglect and 10 years of corruption, which was on a scale that was unprecedented. So I may not be a Modi fan, but I was even less of a fan of the Congress party. Let me put it that way.
Amir Raza Hussain, you are in the very interesting position of being a BJP supporter, but someone who isn't in fact a Modi supporter. And in fact, if I recall correctly, last year in July, you resigned from the vice presidentship of the Delhi BJP when Mr. Modi made his famous puppy remark. How do you, with that particular background, view the prospect of Mr. Modi as Prime Minister? Are you apprehensive, or is your concern allayed with time?
No, there is no real apprehension, but what I do think that we are not really paying attention to. We are talking about Modi coming in, and we are talking about the prospect of business doing well, industry doing well, jobs being created. But what about safety? What about security? What about secularism? What about welfare? What about foreign policy? What about education? Has anyone even bothered to discuss this? All we are talking about is how the rupee is going up, and how the Sensex is going up, and how right-wing policies are going to fill in the coffers of the business community. But what about the rest of the country? 80% of this country does not sit in boardrooms or work in industries. 80% of this country is rural, it's agricultural, it's in villages. What about their concerns? You think Mr. Modi coming will create jobs for them? No. All we are discussing is crony capitalism.
Well,
let's get away from that.
Just a moment. Actually, forgive me. We have been discussing that. You just weren't with us in part one. A lot of those are issues we've been discussing for a long time. But I take your point that, in fact, you have certain fundamental reservations about the way in which the media and perhaps Delhi drawing rooms and Bombay drawing rooms are perceiving Mr. Modi, and I note that. But I want to move on now to question whether there is a new era opening, as Shobha Dey suggested, or whether that new era may not be quite as new as we believe. And one of the things I want to take up first with you, Gulcharan Das, and then toss it around, is this talk, Mr. Modi, his motto, minimum government, maximum governance. It sounds very clever and appealing. What does it mean to you? And how much of a change would it be? Give me a concrete answer.
Well, I think what he's talking about is the fact that we have lots of laws in a country, but those laws are not implemented. And therefore, we have lots of government, we have lots of officials, but what we don't get is delivery. And therefore, really the issue of this country relates fundamentally to good governance. Even if we are able to get the economic rate up, even if we are able to create 8 to 10 million jobs, but if you have to bribe somebody to get a completion certificate for your house, or if you have to bribe somebody to get a birth certificate, you know, that's not what will bring happiness to our country. And so I think that's what he's focused on. And at least there are a lot of people who voted for Modi who were not Hindu nationalists, and I think that's what they're expecting from Modi. They're not people there. When he's, you know, over this weekend, a study came out.
Let me stop you there. Let me stop you there. I don't want to know why people voted for Modi. I'm now interested in pursuing what Modi means. Let's not go into why people voted. I want to stick to what Modi means when he uses these clever phrases and whether those clever phrases suggest a new era is opening up. Siddharth Varadarajan, when he talks about minimum government, maximum governance, do you get the feeling he's changing the role or wants to change the role of government India? That he wants to change the relationship between government and people? And if that's what he intends, will that create a fundamental new paradigm?
No, I think the slogan is a bogus slogan, quite frankly, because the fact is that good governance is required. But when you say minimum government, the government is also required, and the fact is that whether it's healthcare, education, there's a whole bunch of areas where the government has unfortunately absented itself from the lives of people. And you're paying the price for that in terms of the pathetic state of the health and education in this country, and the pathetic human development record in Gujarat. So, you know, when somebody says, I want minimum government, I think one needs to ask, what exactly is it that they have in mind? Because how can the government abdicate its responsibility to provide for basic public health, sanitation, education system for the majority of the people in this country?
In other words, you're suggesting minimum government could orphan the Indian people and leave their essential concerns unattended to. Is that your fear?
And this is the new, because this is precisely what we've seen over the last 10, 12 years, where the government, despite all the talk of guarantee people's rights, has abdicated its responsibility in sector after sector.
Let me bring you in on that point of minimum government, maximum governance, Mr. Kunoria. Many industrialists welcome it because they believe it means that they will be free to be entrepreneurs without having to worry about government regulation, government concern. Is that how you see it? And associated with it, do you believe that in fact you will see less conscious planning and more leeway to industrialists to do what they believe is right and to pursue profit more openly? Is that how you interpret it?
So Karan, let me go back to phase one of your discussion where you talked about what signal Modi can send, which would be a powerful signal. So I take the point of minimum government. You know, there are so many ministries in this country. I mean, let's take the industry ministry, for example, and then there is a heavy industry ministry, which is really quite unnecessary because it should be under the industries ministry. There's a commerce ministry, which also deals ultimately with industry. So industry and commerce can actually get combined together as one ministry. Similarly, there is power. I mean, the power ministry, ironically, has the least amount of power in terms of dealing with the issue of electricity or energy. So we should be talking about an energy ministry. So the way I look at minimum government is, if he actually builds a cabinet which is much smaller than the cabinet today and signals a shift and change in the manner in which the ministries are run so that they are more effective, that the coordination, instead of taking place across ministries, takes place within the ministries itself. So, I mean, there are different ways of interpreting minimum government and maximum governance.
Absolutely.
Now, how I interpret maximum governance is, you know, things like moving away from physical controls into fiscal controls, by moving away from actually having to get approvals rather than merely meeting the guidelines and getting, you know, self-regulation. So I think there are many issues, and I think what industry and business is looking at is the freedom to operate without having to run to government, and by allowing industry to self-regulate itself and actually become the conscience keeper of itself rather than abdicate itself from responsibility by just getting approvals from the government.
That's a very clear and full answer you're giving me. Sandeep Bamsai, interpret that answer in terms of how much of a change it would be for India?
Look at what Mr. Kanoria has just said, and I wrote about this on Sunday. You've got Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas.
Don't go into detail. How much of a change would that be if it happens?
Oh, it'll be a metamorphosis. How does it work? What is the apparatus like? You have a ministry. The ministry has public sector undertakings under it, right? These linkages cannot be ignored. So the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas has the oil marketing companies, and they would prefer that those oil marketing companies remain under them.
So you agree that because minimum government, maximum governance, if implemented the way Mr. Kanoria is talking, is actually going to be a sea change?
You need to right-size the government. You need to downsize the government. When he talks about minimum government, right? What is he saying? Let's combine these things. You have a micro and small and medium enterprises ministry, you have a heavy industries ministry, and you have an industry ministry.
Sandeep, don't go into the detail. I'm asking a critical question. If all of this happens, is this a new paradigm?
If he were to appoint a cabinet where he streamlines the very process of government, that is a message by itself.
And it's a paradigm change.
Absolutely.
This will therefore be, in a sense, a Thatcher moment.
Well, more than that, it will be a Modi moment. But Karan, you have to understand that the public sector undertakings the government would not like to unfetter the public sector undertakings. And for that, he will have to create something like a disinvestment ministry, which happened in the past. But its functionality will be completely different from what it was.
Shobhade, we're getting a clear idea of what minimum government, maximum governance means from the standpoint of the economy and industry. There are people like Mr. Kanoria and Sandeep Bamzai who believe that this would usher in a new paradigm. There's Siddharth Varadarajan, who has deep concerns about the fact that this might ignore the essential problems faced by the majority of India that doesn't live in urban centers and doesn't work in boardrooms. But there's another sense in which Mr. Modi could also represent a fundamental change to the way the country has been governed, and that is his attitude to secularism. He came up with that phrase, the burqa of secularism. Do you think that he'll reinterpret, redefine that concept? And if he does, will that be unsettling or would that be welcome for India?
Karan, the point is that we have hit the absolute rock bottom in our polity and in terms of just the morale of the country. Now the only way out of this pit is up. So to go back to your question about maximum government and minimum government and governance and all the rest of it, these are just words at the end of the day. If you deconstruct it, it's open to interpretation. The way I see it is what he is, I hope, intending to do when he talks about minimum government is less interference, is to get rid of red tapeism, to do the sort of cleanup that has been required in our ministries with our bureaucrats to make sure the nexus between big business, bureaucracy, politics, if he can possibly, and it's a Herculean feat if he can do it, if he can tackle that on a war footing, if he can clean up the backlog in our courts where the average citizen has no recourse to justice and has to wait for 20 and 25 years, then yes we would look at it with respect. But if it's just going to be a lot of words, and when he talks about maximum governance, if he's actually going to announce the concrete steps he's going to take also at state government level as to how we can improve the quality of life, as was mentioned earlier on your panel, whether it's health issues, whether it's education, whether it's, I'm surprised nobody ever discusses security and safety of women. Nobody. If these are concerns that, India is preoccupied with, the young in India. If he can provide jobs, how he intends providing these jobs. These are the kind of proposals he needs to immediately not just announce but try and implement the soonest, fast track a lot of this. Then perhaps, and this is all assuming he's going to be the Prime Minister, of course.
Absolutely.
Then yes, we'll say chapeau.
Okay, let me repeat to you, Amir Raza Hussain, the question I put to Shobhade, because I think it's also a fundamental element of the manner in which Mr. Modi could change India and usher in a new India. And it's to do with the concept of secularism, which has governed us for the last 65 years. It's part of the preamble of the Indian Constitution. Mr. Modi talks about the burqa of secularism. Do you get the feeling that he might seek to reinterpret that phrase? And would that reinterpretation lead to a different country? Would it be unsettling? Would it be welcome? And how do you view that possibility?
Well, Karan, you know, first, just to quickly go through this other...
No, please don't. Can I stop you? Don't go back through the other thing because we're running out of time. Ahmed, stick to my question because we're short of time.
Capitalism.
Stick to my question because we're short of time.
As far as his attitude towards secularism is concerned, I think all you need to do is to look at what he's doing in Gujarat. You don't have to go further. He's been Chief Minister of Gujarat for 13 years. Look at the kind of secularism which he's implemented in that state. You will find out the kind of secularism he's going to bring to the country. In 13 years, there has not been one MLA who has been from the Muslim community in Gujarat, let alone there being a minister. Not only an MLA, in 13 years, in 3 elections, Mr. Modi has not given a ticket, a single ticket, to a member of the Muslim community in Gujarat, when there are 13 to 15% Muslims in Gujarat. Look at the number of tickets which he has given in this parliamentary election. This tells you exactly what kind of secularism he is going to bring to the table.
All right. Let me then put this same issue to you, Siddharth Varadarajan. Are we being unfair in constantly bringing up secularism as an issue when we talk about Mr. Modi? I brought it up because it could be one fundamental way in which he moves away from the Nehruvian consensus. One way is to change the whole nature of the role of government. A second is to change the federal balance between the centre and the states. And those, in a sense, are things that people are expecting. But the third way is to change the concept of secularism as it's been practiced. Now, are we unfair to bring that up and then make a concern and issue of it? Or do you think it is a fundamental issue that needs to be discussed?
I think it is a fundamental issue because so far as Amir Raza Hussain says, Mr. Modi's record from 2002 up to the present does not inspire any confidence that he respects secularism as a value, as a guiding principle for Indian society, for India's polity. Instead, he has, like the BJP does, they attack secularism, they attack those who advocate this as pseudo-secularists and so on and so forth. But the issue that concerns us is justice. Mr. Modi is very proud of saying that, you know, people were convicted, but the fact is that, you know, whatever justice happened as, after the 2002 riots is because of the intervention of the Supreme Court, because of the early involvement of the NHRC. Left to themselves, the Gujarat police, the Gujarat administration fudged all of those cases. So how can anybody believe that Mr. Modi is serious? And one can only be filled with dread if that model of secularism that he has mastered in Gujarat will be then introduced across the rest of the country.
Okay. You know, a moment ago at the very beginning of this program, Gurcharan Das, you compared Mr. Modi to Margaret Thatcher, and you said in many ways the impact he would have on government in India is similar to what she had in the late 70s and early 80s on government in Britain. Now, there's no doubt that Margaret Thatcher changed Britain, and many people believe that Mr. Modi will change the Nehruvian consensus and create a new paradigm. But Margaret Thatcher also left behind a more polarized Britain and a more divided society. And when we bring up this whole issue of secularism and the way the minorities and the Muslims in particular view it, is there a danger that in changing India and in giving the country a new paradigm, Mr. Modi will also divide it and polarize it?
I compared Modi to Margaret Thatcher with one hope. Most of us think of Margaret Thatcher as a right-wing person who did a lot of economic reforms. But in fact, Margaret Thatcher's enduring legacy is in the way she actually reformed the institutions of government and made the British government a lot more accountable. Now, if you saw the study that came out this weekend, the CIA study, which looked at speeches of Mr. Modi of the last 2 years, they said that for every time he mentioned Hindutva, he mentioned development 500 times. That's 500 to 1. I think Mr. Modi is going to be focused on development.
Okay.
Having said that, I think the best thing he could do is as soon as he gets elected, is to come out and tell people that I am the leader of all Indians and that I will not tolerate anyone discriminating against minorities or mistreating minorities. I think that would be a very good signal for him to send out, because there are a lot of people who voted for him not because they believe in Hindu nationalism, but because they believe in his development agenda.
Shobha Dey, let me bring you in on that point. Many people look with hope to Mr. Modi because they think a time has come for India to move beyond the Nehru embrace. And 65 years later, we need to rethink center-state relations, we need to rethink secularism, we need to rethink the role of government. Others say that that's a consensus that actually worked so effectively, it gave us stability and harmony. Don't repair it, it ain't broken. How do you view the prospect of a new paradigm? And do you feel a sense of apprehension, or do you believe the time has come and we must bite this bullet?
No, there's no question of saying we are not apprehensive. Any right-thinking Indian will be apprehensive, because also, let's not fool ourselves, this particular election has been a divisive election, and the division has been along religious lines. So that negates everything that for the last 65 or 66 years India has stood for. So if we are apprehensive, we are justified in feeling the way we do. That he has to prove everybody wrong and focus on providing that kind of reassurance to the minorities has to be his top priority. And to talk about Margaret Thatcher, I'm sorry, but you know, it was a completely different era to begin with, and she didn't have to deal with religious differences. So let's not talk apples and pears here. So I think his biggest challenge will be to convince not just people of India but internationally as well, that no matter what his personal beliefs may be, we are indeed one country, and we are to safeguard our position as a secular nation above everything else, to keep harping on development, which is actually going to benefit largely the rich of the country, the business community of this country, the corporates of this country, make them perhaps far richer, also at the expense of many other issues which are equally relevant and important. That is another thing, that we shouldn't go gaga about just the development and the development and the development model. Let's see it in perspective and let's give him a fair chance.
Absolutely. We have to give him a fair chance. It would be wrong not to do so. But there's a very interesting double strain that's gone right through this one hour. There's a sense of hope and expectation expressed by Mr. Kanoria and Mr. Gurcharan Das. There's a sense of apprehension and concern expressed by Siddharth Varadarajan and Amir Raza Hussain. And then there's that call from Shobha Dey that he needs to address the apprehensions and not simply concentrate on development, because there's another aspect of fear that he evokes. How conscious is Mr. Modi of riding both these horses simultaneously?
I disagree with what Shobha Dey just said, that this election was fought on religious lines. Where was it ever fought on religious lines? Where was Hindutva in this election? But leave our
point aside. But how conscious is Mr. Modi that he has two horses to ride?
I would think that this man knows exactly where his time is, what his time is, and why he is poised to do what he is supposed to. I don't think he brings the baggage, if there is any baggage. I don't think he brings that baggage to Delhi if he comes here tomorrow.
Well, that's a very reassuring note to end on, because what you're suggesting is Mr. Modi is well aware not just of how his admirers view him, but how his critics view him, and he's prepared to respond to both to ensure he's a success.
This is too big an opportunity. I don't think you will find him fumbling.
In other words, his ambition alone will ensure that he succeeds.
Very much.
Thank you very much for that very reassuring note. Also, my thanks to all my other guests for joining me, and my apologies for the few sound problems we had earlier on. In particular, my apologies to Siddharth Varadarajan, who often couldn't hear me. And if you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.